And advocating for yourself with all this fear that's happening right now, I think is the most important thing on both an individual basis and also a bigger sort of like community basis, because the more everyone, is in that regulated stress state, they're happier, right? They're more likely to get along. The economy is more likely to, improve.
Step into the world of success with your brand amplified, the ultimate podcast designed to unravel the intricacies of thriving businesses. I'm your host, Annika Jackson, and I'm on a mission to uncover the stories, strategies, and secrets that have propelled entrepreneurs and business leaders to success. I am thrilled to have a much needed conversation with Erin Harrington today. Erin, you're the founder of Soul Values. You have the Whole Life Planner, an integrated toolkit for purpose, productivity, and peace. These are all things that I think all of us are looking for in our lives when there's so many unknowns and things outside of our control, right? We have to look at what can we control. And I know I'm not alone in often being in a place of overwhelm, having to figure out what I have to prioritize at any one moment, which may mean my communication isn't as good with people that I work with in certain areas because I have to focus on these other areas, or I have to focus more on, like we were talking before we jumped on, getting my daughter through this next phase where she just got her license. We're looking at universities. She's going to have to start applying soon. So all very exciting things. So thank you for being here and allowing me that long introduction.
Thank you. It is such a pleasure to be here. Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about how you got here, because you had several sales roles in the grind before you pivoted to starting your own business.
Yeah. So, I've had two major burnouts, which influenced what I do with my work now.
Yeah.
The first burnout was, back in around 2002, and I had just led a startup or very directly supported as the top salesperson, a successful IPO. It was actually affiliate marketing. We were bringing affiliate marketing to the marketplace. So at any rate, that was my first major burnout. And how I knew that I was burned out was because I took a leave of absence and traveled. I backpacked with my my now ex-husband to Alaska. We were living in San Francisco. We drove up to Alaska for, 10 weeks and camped out in the wilderness, and my pain went away. And so I was like, wow, okay, this is fascinating. I came back. I continued with my job for a bit longer. And then I was just like, you know what? I love my work. I love helping businesses grow. I love sales and connecting with people this way, but my body is not an option, right? So I retired from that role and planned to actually become an acupuncturist, like complete change. But then my next burnout happened because I was pregnant with my second child. And, after she was born, I started to have stroke-like episodes. And I went on this like medical diagnostic journey for the next 5 years, pretty intense, trying to figure out what was wrong with me. Because I was largely bedbound, having a really hard time functioning. And ultimately, I do have a number of, big serious conditions. I have mitochondrial disease, dysautonomia, a whole bunch of other stuff. And when I have this thing called POTS. When I stand up, my blood pressure drops, which can make it really hard to, live an active life every time you go up and down, right? So, back in 2010, I had this neurologist who would always start the appointments with, how's your stress? That was the first question before she asked, how are your symptoms? And so I said to her one time after this went on 3 or 4 different appointments, I was like, why do you always do that? And she was like, well, because, the autonomic nervous system, which controls all the automatic stuff in your body, your blood pressure, heart rate, temperature, all of that stuff, it's specifically tied to stress. So if you have stress, you're more likely to have these other physical problems, including cloudy thinking, all sorts of stuff like this, whether you're healthy or have medical, like it doesn't matter. Everybody has this autonomic nervous system. And so I took from there an opportunity that I could, if I managed my stress response actively, I could change my experience in life and across all of my life, right? Not just my work, but my health, my well-being, my relationships, all of this stuff. And so I started to experiment with that, and the results have been phenomenal. It's kind of like to the point where doctors are shocked by. So let me give you an example. If I go in and see a doctor, a new specialist who's never seen me before, they walk into the room and they're completely floored when they see me because I look pretty healthy. I'm upright, I'm walking, but on paper, you wouldn't think that I would actually even be able to move. So, you know, I sort of fell in love with learning how to regulate my stress response because it allowed me to get into that executive state versus the stress state. There's two parts of your autonomic nervous system. There's stress, and then there's this relaxation response. And when you're relaxed, you tap into the executive state. That's where all the higher thinking happens. That's where decision making, productivity is just more smooth. Your focus is better. You're able to communicate better. All of the things. Like, why wouldn't you want any of those things? So that's really, how this started. And from there, I created this system called Purpose Elevated. And that turned into my book and all these other things.
So it started as a necessity, really.
Yes.
And what I think is so interesting about that is I've had very physical reactions when I've been in workplaces where I was just lots of stress, where I realized that I'm probably not the right fit for this position or this organization or the roles that we thought I was going to go into in the future. I was sick every month. I had to really take a break and go, okay, I'm going to move back to part-time, which really wasn't even part-time at that point. But because I was like, I have to get my body healthy, because without our health, we don't have anything. We can't participate with our families, with our children, with our work, with our colleagues, with anything we want to do in life. So I just identify so much, not with everything that you've been through. I'm empathetic to it, but I also have seen how, I could very well have gone down an even worse road if I didn't start thinking about how do I take better care of myself? How do I make sure I'm aligned with my purpose and what I really want to do? And I imagine that's a lot of the work that you help people do.
Exactly. Yeah. The purpose component is the basic sort of fundamentals. Yeah. By purpose, I mean your unique soul values, which is also the name of my company, but those inherent values that we all have. And I think when you tap into that, when you tap into that, it naturally gets you straight into that executive relaxation response. So it's kind of like, it's a fast track. It's a shortcut. Why wouldn't you?
Right. So how did you go from figuring out these constructs to heal yourself to saying, this is something I can offer to other people, and then building up that client base? Because obviously this is also a shift in your brand, right? And who you are, going from really high performing sales, corporate, taking companies through IPOs, to now having a shift into thinking about values, thinking about your entire life and how you take care of yourself so that you can be a better you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the big shift happened. So, from 2010 onward, I started to really tap into my values. And anytime I felt stressed, I would counter that with something that would make me feel better. Sometimes that was movement. If I could get out and do a walk, great. If I could, anything in nature, helps me. So part of the solution that I've developed for people is that it's very custom. It's based on what matters for you versus what matters for me, so that you can get into that state. But ultimately, so what happened was in 2010 through 2019 or so, I was doing some consulting on the side, not a ton of it because of my health. Worked for another startup in there. And then in 2019, I had a number of concussions. I had 3 concussions. And this is important to my story because I knew something was happening. I knew something wasn't right, but doctors dismissed it as stress. And because I had advocated for myself so much early on in my earlier diagnoses, right? I knew that when they dismiss you, that doesn't mean that it should be dismissed. If you feel something internally, you go out and you get that, no matter how many second opinions you need. So I had multiple doctors blowing me off about these head traumas that I was having, coming to really disoriented. And finally, I went to another hospital network in the Boston area and was like, I think I'm having seizures again because I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. Bring me in and let's see. And so they brought me in for 5 days. On the second day, I came to twice with a room of about 20 people, crash car, all this stuff. My heart had stopped.
Oh my gosh.
20 seconds, my heart stopped. And because of the type of heart problem that I was experiencing, they can't paddle me. They can't resuscitate me. My heart jumped back on its own, fortunately. So that happened twice on that second day that I was in the hospital, and they rushed me off to put a pacemaker in. They're like, you can't leave here without a pacemaker. You're a liability. And so, contrast that with how hard I had to fight for it. This was happening, I would go out of it several times a day. And I was coming to sometimes while I was driving. Like I'd be at an intersection here in town, and I'd be like, what am I doing in the car? And where am I supposed to turn? Am I going straight? Like it's a 4-way intersection. I have no idea why I'm here and where I'm supposed to go. So it was terrifying. But fortunately, I've always really advocated for myself really well in life, and even despite a lot of challenges. And so ultimately they put the pacemaker in, everything, like my life has transitioned significantly since then because now I'm not passing out as often as I was. My brain has more resources and things like that. And so it was at that point that it became super clear to me that what I was doing was really important because there's high achievers. So naturally high achievers, especially, and a lot of leaders, entrepreneurs, things like this are natural high achievers. We always want to do everything well, right? Everything.
And we all want to do everything at the same time.
Exactly. And it's hard to do those things without stressing yourself out. And then, of course, if you do have stress, that minimizes access to those executive resources. And so it just basically became super passionate about bringing this story out there. The name Soul Values actually came to me during one of my episodes right before the pacemaker went in. I sort of came to and heard the phrase soul values and saw it in like big bubble letters. And so, I don't know, I guess my brain, whoever or whatever this is, it wanted me to help other people. And so, yeah, I feel very aligned with that being my purpose. I still naturally love business. So that's kind of why I tend to work mostly with entrepreneurs and high achieving leaders. Yeah, that was a very meandering long.
No, I love it because I think that's, like you said, that's such an important part of your story and your journey. And I'd love to hear then, did people in your network, after you told them what you were doing, just say, okay, I want to work with you, or refer people to you? Or how did you start building up your work? And then what does that look like now when you do work with somebody?
I have like pure coaching clients. I also have clients that need business growth along with this sort of like regulating their stress response.
Yeah.
And so it's very custom. I don't do group programs at this point. I'm thinking about it. But, essentially, most of my clients are working with me on a 12-week basis. We set goals at the beginning. We do a whole values assessment. So in my book, there's about 20 different worksheets in there. And so we do that together, but then paid clients get a few extra worksheets. We work through all of those and then put together a plan, a 3-month plan to meet your top 3 goals across all aspects of your life. Because a problem that I see is a lot of people, especially high achievers, think, okay, have work and I have life, 2 totally different places. And we're not split human beings. You can't split things up like that and not expect to have really bad results, right? I think it's dangerous. And so I work with my clients to make sure that they're aligning 3 goals across all areas of their life. And, they identify how they're going to support themselves in each of those areas, which is, a big part of it, right? When you identify how you're going to support yourself, something really magical happens because you then end up doing the thing more likely. Like you're giving your brain permission to do it.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly believe that. Just thinking about, it's funny, I was just talking to somebody yesterday about, here's what I really want to do. Like, if I could just do what I want. And he's like, you realize that that's pretty much what you're doing already. And it was so funny to think about that. I'm like, yeah, but I have other goals, and just talking about it and thinking about it and putting actual plans in place, it really does make things happen so much more quickly.
Yeah.
Where I set a couple of goals this week, and I'm already now on my way to achieving them even faster because I set the intention, and then I had conversations with people who, were in alignment with wanting to work with me in certain ways. So I love that you bring this back together where you're saying this is who you are as a whole person, because I think that we need more of that. And we saw that shift a little bit, but now we see that companies, some large organizations are trying to create that separation again and not looking at us holistically. But I think that's the only way we can look at each other. And that's the only way that we can identify what's really of value to us, what opportunities, right? Whether
Exactly.
it's personal or professional.
Yeah. And again, it all comes down to efficiency. When you separate work and life, you're making your brain work harder, which means you're going to be less efficient, period, on those 2 different domains. Whereas if you look at it as sort of like the wheel of life, all the different key domains mapped out, I believe in sort of spoon feeding your brain support, basically. Yeah.
Okay.
And it goes a long way because look, I'm still very much disabled, but now I have 2 different jobs going on. I've authored a book. I've been able to, get out there, speaking engagements, talking with you, things like this. And all of that came directly from using my daily tools and making sure that my brain stays in that executive state, even when things are like my medical stuff is flaring. Yeah. I still am doing a lot better. Significantly better than I've ever been doing. Yeah. And I see that potential for so many people. I mean, when you look around the world, a lot of people are stressed, right? Especially with the economy at the moment, some of the political stuff. I mean, there's stress.
There's a lot of fear and of the unknown. Yeah, there's a lot of things that we don't have control over, which definitely leads to a lot more stress. People looking at their 401ks and retirement plans and getting panicked over things, people worried about their jobs or loved ones. I have dual citizenship, right? So I have a lot of family who are citizens now from overseas, but I also think, are any of them in danger, even though they've been in this country for a long time and they are citizens because we've seen some of the stuff going on? Or will we have jobs? Will AI take away our jobs, right? There's so many more things that people are just hearing all of these negative signals. So what are some ways that people can think about regulating themselves, getting out of stress mode into executive mode, and, maybe paying less attention to some of those outside negative signals?
Yeah, you raised such a great set of points there. So fear is the number one thing that will trigger your brain to go into that stress response or get stuck in that stress response. And so countering fear actively, consciously countering fear actively is sort of the remedy, in my opinion, in my experience. And so what that means, like, for example, in my book's over there, so I'm not going to show you, but on my daily pages, there's 10 simple prompts. And, you identify your soul, your primary goal for the day, and a whole bunch of other stuff. But you also set how you'll support yourself. And for example, I might say, or many of my clients say this, I'll limit my news today to 1 hour chunks or 5 minute chunks or whatever it is, or I won't go on the news at all. If someone sends me the news, then I'm just going to ignore it, right? You don't have to listen. You don't have to engage. Another thing is I find, limiting social media is important right now, and also finding things that make you feel good. So if you just at a really high level, think about, what resets you on a daily basis when you get on on the gym equipment, whatever that is for you. Do you feel better? How does that feel? And when you connect those things with the relaxation response and the executive response, you're more likely to want more of it because you know that that's what's happening. That's a feel-good thing. And so, yeah, really just identifying ways throughout any given day that you can, take 5-minute breaks and rejuvenate yourself. I mean, even a glass of water is a way to support yourself. There's, I think, saying no to conversations, for example. Like if a friend keeps talking with you about something that's stressing you out, you say, I need a break. Not from you necessarily, but this conversation. And advocating for yourself with all this fear that's happening right now, I think is the most important thing on both an individual basis and also a bigger sort of like community basis, because the more everyone, is in that regulated stress state, they're happier, right? They're more likely to get along. The economy is more likely to, improve, all sorts of things like this. And your personal experience is just going to feel better. Even if you just have pure medical symptoms, your experience will be better by regulating your stress response, no matter what. It's science.
Nice. Well, I was just going to say that your planner has science-backed information and data, self-care, different practices. We talked about opening a page and having 10 prompts. What are some of the other things that are included as part of the daily ritual to get people set up in the right headspace, the right mindset, and understand how they're going to choose to regulate throughout the day?
Yeah. So, for example, the first question on there is gratitude. Yes, I'm grateful for. And that's sort of easy, but gratitude is a fast track to getting into that executive response. So gratitude affirmations are really helpful. Let me take a step back and say that, I recommend that people spend just 5 minutes on these, usually at the start of the day. That's sort of how you start your day with your cup of coffee or tea or whatever, and just knock out these prompts. And so there's gratitude, affirmation, today's soul goal. And by soul, I'm spelling it S-O-U-L, but it also is sort of a double entendre. It means soul, S-O-L-E too, meaning, you have to identify that one primary goal, your ride or die for the day, because it's easy to have all sorts of goals. And then at the end of the day, if you don't achieve the things that you set out to do, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Right? So again, that's learning to regulate your stress response by setting micro goals so that you're not overdoing your brain. I'll support myself by, we talked about that. Dump zone is one of my favorites. I love dump zone because, if you're an entrepreneur or leader, we talked about this earlier. You have fantastical ideas that sort of come up throughout any given day. You're moving all sorts of different parts. The dump zone is those big ideas or those big to-dos that if you stopped everything that you were doing in that moment and went over to it, it would devastate your day, and more than your day. It would devastate all of your progress, right? So a dump zone is sort of a placeholder for all those important ideas that you just have the thought, you drop it. so you can go back to it later. And it's an efficiency thing. It helps with both efficiency and overall effectiveness. And then the last, there are a few others that I might have missed, but the last two prompts you're meant to sort of come back at the end of the day or even the next morning and address those. And those are things like today's win, because acknowledging your win directly gets you again into that executive relaxation state. And also how I'll improve. So consciously identifying how you're going to improve the next day or going forward is really important, because it's not you against somebody else. It's you working with yourself to meet your goals. Like maybe you learned that your goals for the day were too big, right? On that one day or something like this. Or maybe you didn't allocate enough time to a certain project or whatever it is. Learning those little micro things reduces other chronic micro stressors that compounded are kind of bringing your brain down. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's obviously you're the best case study you have, but I'd love to hear a little bit about, are there particular industries or levels of people in business, titles, or, your ideal customer persona?
I'd say most, at least the people that are working with me at this point, tend to be startup leaders, founders, or multi-passionate entrepreneurs. So they have a lot of different things that they want to do, and they're trying to figure out a plan to attack all of those. Because I do sort of dabble in the mindset piece, of course, but I also have the sales and strategy experience. So, there's a lot of different parts in there. I would say that eventually I would like to work more with like C-suite leaders to help them learn to use these tools for their team, to grow their team so that their teams are more effective. Yeah. And then, I would just say mostly entrepreneurs and founders are really drawn to this because they're overwhelmed. They want to do everything right. And, this might sound a little bit woo. It doesn't have to be woo at all. Like you could use it if you're in that space, but it's not intended to be woo. And so, the bottom line is I want people to get out of that survival mode, because that's our default network, right? Get out of it by practicing these micro shifts regularly. And I'd say about 70% women, probably more than men. Yeah, a couple podcast hosts. Yeah, all sorts of stuff.
Nice. Yeah, and I think it's interesting because what I am seeing in all of business, even with men's organizations or mostly men entrepreneur groups, as well as women's, is that everybody is looking at this shift and trying to include their whole selves mindset and kind of reframing. And I think that's a really beautiful shift that we're seeing. And that's why we need people like you who are doing the work and who can customize and create things that then the rest of us can utilize, because you've gone through this, you've tested it yourself, you've tested on different clients, your methodologies are tried and true. They're not just, sometimes people have ideas and they have one thing that's worked for them, but not for everybody else. But you've been able to show that it works for other people. And I'd love to hear, if you don't mind sharing an anecdote or two from people you've worked with and what the shifts that you've seen, whether it's been in their business and, maybe they completely choose to go down a different path, or maybe they find even more success because they're integrating all of these tools.
Yeah, let me give you a couple anecdotes. One is a very successful entrepreneur, unnamed, a man who also is a successful podcast host. He's, an 8-figure entrepreneur. His challenge when he came to me was finding more time for his family, for things that he cared about. It wasn't necessarily to grow work, because he didn't need to improve his performance at work. He wanted to be more available for his family and the things that mattered to him. And so we worked together over this 12-week period, and the result, he didn't even have to continue, to be honest with you, because he felt so complete with the sort of approach that I have.
Yeah.
It's very simple. I mean, the stuff that I teach is super simple, super accessible, but we're just not taught this.
And we need permission sometimes. We need to work with somebody else.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then I have another client, and this speaks to the multi-passionate piece. She's a lawyer. She is an entrepreneur of a couple different businesses. And she's also a coach, right? So she has a lot going on, and she's still a mom too. So, in the case of her, I gave her permission to be that multi-passionate entrepreneur. I shouldn't say I gave her permission. I helped her feel that permission because everyone around her was saying, you can't do this. You can't do this. You got to pick a lane. And she's like, I don't want to pick a lane. I don't want to pick a highway of multiple different lanes. And so, I can say that she's also doing fantastic. And then there's one more example, an entrepreneur founder of a service-based business. This is a woman client. And she, I would say, is a testament to my book in particular, the daily pages. And so she used that effectively, right? And her description of it is that it just feels like peace. Using the system completely feels like peace for her. So those are a few examples. If you download, for any of your listeners, there's at stresslessblueprint.com. I have these daily pages with all the prompts and teaches you how to use it and things like this. So you can have access to my system if you want to check it out.
Wow. Yeah, fantastic. I think that's really great because then I think even, I'm looking at that page right now going, oh, this is great. But I know that buying the book is going to be more effective because, for me, because then I have it in one place, bound and all of that. But I think it's amazing that you're offering these assessments and this value to people. So thank you for doing that.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, this has been really lovely. And I just applaud you for advocating for yourself. I think that's something we don't do enough of. We, look at other people and the values they place on us more than the value we inherently have and the things that we need to do to make sure that we are living in our purpose and our vision and our mission and true to our own values. Because like you, I've been there. As I was saying, I've been that stressed out person who kept getting sick over and over again and had to go, okay, whatever else is going on, I know this is a major stressor and this is something that's causing me harm. So no matter how hard it is, right, to walk away from opportunities because they're not the ones that are serving you.
Right.
So.
Do you now have that level of stress in the businesses that you've created for yourself?
That's a good question. Well, I'm multi-passionate. So I teach grad school. I've just created a course at the graduate level I'm going to be teaching in the fall as well. I'm also getting an MBA specializing in AI and machine learning. So I'm very interested in that intersection of people really living in their own value, their own purpose, right? Their ikigai, along with education, curriculum development, AI. And then how do we make sure people are learning the right thing at the right time to fulfill their true inherent purpose? So I do a lot of different things. And then I have I'm a single mom to a teenage daughter who just got her license and is now finishing the college tours and moving into a whole different world. So it's a really exciting time. And I think like probably your client who needed to feel okay, right? And give herself permission and to do all of the things that she wants to do. I'm kind of like that. Like I see where they're all threaded and looped and how they connect, even if other people might not. So, yeah.
Right. It's your life to live, not someone else's life. They don't get to choose that. So
there are more stressors than others at certain times, but I also know there's an end limit to this. And I know a little bit more how to regulate myself. And I'm always interested in learning other techniques. So, so I'm really excited to dive into your book, your planner.
Good. I'm thrilled. I can't wait to hear what you think of it. Let me know after you've used it or if any questions come up, of course. So
amazing.
What a treat it's been to connect with you because I feel like we're very aligned in our belief system and where we're trying to go and living our purpose, our mission. Yeah,
I think
without the
that's
stress.
exactly. And I think that's exactly what the world needs right now. And everybody who's listening is probably either on that journey or knows that they need to be on it, right? And it needs to take even taking baby steps,
Right.
downloading Erin's bonuses and materials to just start getting yourself to think about things, right? You don't have to do it all at once.
Right.
So
That's super important. Don't replace, if you do download this, please promise me, to all the listeners, please promise me that you won't feel guilty if you're not doing it what you think is right, air quotes, because that's counterintuitive to the what we're trying to do here. So, just baby steps,
baby
baby
steps.
steps.
And I see a couple of quotes or messages on the board behind you. And my last question is always, do you have a favorite quote, mantra, verse, poem, family motto, words that continue to inspire and impact you and your life?
I knew you, yeah, I knew you'd ask that, but I can't, at this point, no, I can't think of anything right off the top of my head. The quote behind me, though, it's attributed on here to Shakespeare, but I don't think this is Shakespeare who said this. It's the meaning of life is to find your gift. The purpose of life is to give it away. So I love this quote, but it can't possibly be Shakespeare that wrote that.
But that's a great thing to end on because I think that just resonates with what you do and who you are so much.
Thank you.
So, yeah.
It's been such a pleasure.
It's been such a pleasure, Erin. Thank you to everybody who's listening to this episode or watching it on your favorite platform. We'll have a link to Erin's website and freebies in the show notes. Do reach out to her, reach out to me. Let me know, how you found this episode. Leave us a rating review. We always love those. And thank you for supporting the podcast. I'll be back again with another amazing guest very shortly. Thanks for listening or watching to this episode of Your Brand Amplified. Don't forget to leave us a rating or review on your favorite podcast listening platform. And if you want to learn more, check us out at yourbrandamplified.com.